Hi, second grade. We're now going to do the second part of Eve of the Emperor Penguins. We are on Chapter 4, Happy Campers. Touching down onto the flat, snowy field was an orange and white helicopter. The helicopter had skis on the bottom so it could land on the ice and snow. The bus came to a stop at the edge of the field. "We must be going to the volcano in the helicopter," said Annie. "By air, just like the rhyme says," said Jack. "Great." Jack had always wanted to fly in a helicopter. Nancy stood up. "For those of you getting off the bus now, please remember, the helicopter blades are extremely dangerous. Always wait for a signal from the pilot before approaching the helicopter." Everyone watched as the spinning blades slowly came to a stop. The pilot waved from the helicopter window. "Okay, Pete says we can go," said Nancy. Jack put their rhyme back into his pocket. He pulled on his backpack. Then, carrying his notebook and pencil, he filed down the aisle after Annie and the others, who would join them in the helicopter. They all scrambled off the bus into the dazzling sunlight. "Jump aboard," said Nancy. Jack and Annie followed the four other adults up the steps of the helicopter and squeezed into a small cabin. Sitting in 2 rows of seats behind the pilot, everyone buckled their seatbelts. Nancy pulled the door shut and turned the latch. Then she sat next to Pete, put on a set of headphones. "Headphones on, everyone. They're under your seats," she said. "They'll protect your ears from the chopper noise and also serve as a radio so I can talk to you." Everyone reached under their seats and took out headphones. Jack and Annie pulled off their hoods. Without taking off their goggles or face masks, they placed the headphones over their ears. The thick pads muffled the sound around them. Jack heard Nancy's voice over the headphones. "Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can everyone hear me?" Everyone nodded. "Okay, Pete, take us to Mount Erebus." Pete the pilot started the helicopter. Even with his headphones on, Jack heard the roaring of the engine and the spinning of the blades. He held his breath as the chopper trembled and lifted off the ice and snow. The helicopter shook and tilted. Then it buzzed forward through the blue sky. Annie aimed her camera out the window and took pictures. The Korean photographer did the same, and the Australian journalist scribbled in his notebook. Jack was too excited to take notes now. "This is great," he thought. "All the words in the rhyme are coming true." As they flew towards the burning mountain of ice and snow, he tried to remember what words came next. He slipped the rhyme out of his pocket and read, "You must go to the burning mountain of ice and snow on wheels by air, then all fall down." "All fall down? Wait a minute. What does that mean?" thought Jack. "Does that mean the chopper falls down? Do we fall out of the chopper?" As these thoughts swirled through Jack's mind, Annie turned and gave him a thumbs up. Jack didn't want to scare her, so he nodded and shoved the rhyme back in his pocket. He watched anxiously out the window as the chopper approached a bright orange-red circle at the top of the mountain. "Below is one of the world's famous lava lakes," Nancy said over her headphones. The chopper hovered motionless above the crater of the volcano. The lava lake bubbled and boiled. "That burning lava is a mile deep," said Nancy. "Its temperature is over 1,700 degrees. Can you guys on this side see okay? Pete?" Pete tilted the helicopter to one side and then the other. Everyone but Jack oohed and awed. Kim and Annie took pictures. "Go," thought Jack, "before we all fall down." Okay, Pete, that's great, said Nancy. Let's land at the lower field camp now. The helicopter tilted upright and began moving down the side of the volcanic mountain. Jack saw a small orange building sticking up from the snow. Colorful snowmobiles were parked near it. Moments later, the chopper touched down onto the slope. It rocked and shuddered and then came to a stop. Phew, thought Jack. They landed without falling from the sky into a burning lava lake. But then, what could all fall down in the rhyme mean? Stay seated until the blades come to a complete stop, said Nancy. Everyone remained in their seats with their seat belts and headphones on. As you know, we'll be driving our snowmobiles up to the summit. Driving a snowmobile can be very dangerous on these steep, icy slopes. Please remember everything you learned in your snowmobile training yesterday. As the others nodded, Annie nodded too. Jack nudged her. They'd never had any training with snowmobiles. Another warning, said Nancy. I know you've all been training this week to prevent altitude sickness, but still, it can be very dangerous. So please let me know if you feel any symptoms. Altitude sickness, Jack wondered. He pulled off his glove again and opened his backpack. He took out the research book and looked up altitude sickness in the index. He turned to the right page and read, altitude sickness, also known as mountain sickness, is caused by a lack of oxygen at great heights. Symptoms include headache, dizziness, and shortness of breath. Climbers traveling up Mount Erebus train for days by climbing to gradually increased heights. Oh no, thought Jack. The spinning of the helicopter blades had come to a stop. Okay, happy campers, said Nancy. All clear. Before we drive up to the top, we'll gather in the hut. Nancy opened the helicopter door. Everyone took off their headphones, undid their seatbelts, and followed her down the steps of the chopper. Jack was last as he struggled to put the research book away, getting his glove back on and then pulling his pack onto his back. What took you so long? Annie asked when he got out of the chopper. Jack just shook his head. Have a safe trip back to the station, Pete. See you later, called Nancy. Pete waved from the window. Then the chopper blades started rotating again. The chopper lifted off the ground and thundered away. Sorry, but these pages don't want to open. There we go. Chapter 5, Lava Bombs. Jack didn't feel like a happy camper anymore. He walked through the cold, thin air. He looked at the snowmobiles parked near the hut. We don't know how to drive snowmobiles, Jack whispered to Anne. We haven't trained for anything, including altitude sickness. That's okay. If we get in trouble, we can use the wand. No, we can't, said Jack. We can't use the wand just for ourselves. Plus, we haven't tried our hardest yet. This way, gang, said Nancy. She was ushering everyone into the small orange building. Jack and Annie followed the group inside. The one-room hut had plastic chairs, a small heater, axes, jugs of water, and shelves with boxes of trail mix. Have a seat and help yourself to some of the best water in the world, Nancy said. It comes from melted glacier ice. Everyone sat on the plastic chairs. Lucy, Kim, Tony, and Allie poured water into tin cups and lowered their masks to drink. Jack was thirsty, but he shook his head no at Annie. He was afraid for them to show their faces. Before we take off, I want to warn you again about snowmobiles, said Nancy. No matter how much training you have, you must be very careful. On our ride up to the crater, remember to drive sideways so if the snowmobile slips and rolls, your legs won't get crushed. Everyone nodded. How do you drive sideways? Jack wondered in panic. Don't be afraid to go fast, and don't lock up the brakes, Nancy said. Locking your brakes can spell disaster. And watch out for the lava bombs, said Allie, the biologist. Lava bombs? Jack said. He quickly cleared his throat and deepened his voice. Excuse me, lava bombs? Lavas that spit from the crater, said Allie. Spits? Repeated Jack. Like oatmeal that bubbles and spatters out of the pot, said Lucy, the space scientist. Except these bombs aren't made out of oatmeal. They're blobs of fiery hot liquid rock. Some of them can be as big as a car. They burn deep holes in the snow and ice. If they hit you, said Tony, chuckling, well, just think about that. Jack did not want to think about that. Seriously, it's pretty neat, said Nancy. For millions of years, hot gas and lava have carved deep hidden places beneath the surface of ice and these slopes, caverns and towers. No one knows all the secrets of the mountain. Nancy took a last sip of water and put her cup down. Okay, guys, you have a few hours to do your experiments and get your stories. Then Pete will come back for us. Let's go. As Jack stood up to go, he almost fell over. The room was spinning. He closed his eyes, but that only made it worse. After the others had filed out the door, Jack sat back down in his chair. I'll just stay here for a minute, he thought, his heart pounding. You okay? Said Annie, coming back to the hut. I'm dizzy, said Jack, trying to catch his breath. I think I have altitude sickness. I don't feel so great either, said Annie. Try taking off your mask and goggles so you can breathe better. She helped Jack lift off his mask and goggles. Does that help? Yeah, a little, but we need lots of help. What do you mean? Said Annie. Help getting over altitude sickness, and help driving snowmobiles, and help dodging lava bombs, help finding an ancient crown. And what is that anyways? An ancient crown. Nancy poked her head in. What's up, guys? You coming? Yikes, said Annie. Jack quickly tried to put his goggles and mask on, but it was too late. What are you? Who are you? Nancy sputtered. You're not a journalist. You're a kid. Don't worry, said Annie in a deep voice. He's my son. What? Said Nancy. He is. I often take him on my assignments. You what? Said Nancy. Annie, give it up, said Jack. We're caught. Oh, okay, said Annie. She pushed up her goggles and pulled down her mask. I'm Annie and he's Jack. We're brother and sister. I'm going to have a heart attack, said Nancy. What are you kids doing up here? We're looking for... Annie stopped. Jack knew even Annie couldn't explain their mission to save Merlin to Nancy. This is unbelievable, said Nancy. I've got to get you two back to the station. Your parents must be frantic. I can't believe this. No, it's not your fault. No one will blame you, said Jackie. But Nancy was pulling out a small radio. Come in, Pete, come in. The radio crackled and popped. Then Pete's voice came through. Hear you, Nancy, he said. Pete, we need to get the chopper back here quick and pick up two of my group. They're just little kids. Not so little, thought Jack. Repeat that, Nancy, said Pete. Two little kids came with the group. I didn't know they were kids. Oh, it's too hard to explain. Can you come back and get them? Sure thing, said Pete. You head up with the others. I'll pick up the kids. Thanks. They'll be here in the hut waiting for you to take them back, said Nancy, over and out. Chapter 6. All Fall Down. Nancy put away her radio, looked at Jack and Annie. I don't know how you two got past me. We're sorry, said Annie. This is unbelievable, said Nancy. Jack couldn't believe it either. How did they mess up so badly? I'm so sorry I brought you here, said Nancy. No, it's our fault, Jack said. It's mine, all mine, said Nancy. She seemed near tears. You're just little kids. Not so little, thought Jack again. A snowmobile rumbled outside, its engine warming up. Oh dear, said Nancy. I've got to lead the group up a safe route to the crater, or they'll be in trouble. But Pete should be back here in just a few minutes. Will you be okay by yourselves till then? We'll be fine, don't worry, said Annie. Good, said Nancy. Here, sweeties. She poured some water in 2 cups and gave them to Jack and Annie. Drink. While they drank the water, Nancy spread a blanket on the floor and turned on the small heater. Lay down here, just rest. She patted the blanket. Jack and Annie laid down. Nancy covered them with another blanket. If you get thirsty, drink more water, she said. Thanks, said Annie. Jack was too embarrassed to say anything. He felt like a preschool kid being put down for his nap. Okay, said Nancy with a big sigh. You kids nearly gave me a heart attack, she repeated half to herself as she left the hut. Sorry, said Jack, but Nancy was gone. Soon the roar and rumble of snowmobiles filled the air as Nancy led the scientists and journalists up the mountains. We really messed up our mission this time, said Jack, laying under the blanket. And we were doing so well, too, said Annie. She sat up. Can I see Morgan's rhyme again, please? He pulled the rhyme out of the pocket and handed it to Annie. Okay, said Annie, and she read aloud. Then all fall down till you come to the cave of the ancient crown. I wonder if this counts as falling down, said Annie. She put the rhyme in her pocket. I don't think so, said Jack. I don't know what it means. There's no ancient crown in Antarctica. It's all science and research and rules and helicopters, snowmobiles. It's the real world. His voice trailed off. Well, I know one thing. I don't want to waste time lying here. She threw the blanket off and stood up. At least I can take a few pictures while we wait for Pete. You really feel like doing that, said Jack. Not really, but I'm going to try, said Annie. I don't think you should, said Jack. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. Maybe I'll see an ancient crown. Yeah, sure, said Jack. Annie put on her goggles and ski mask and headed outside. Jack reached into his pack and pulled out their book. He took off his gloves and looked up ancient crown in the index. He wasn't surprised to find it wasn't there. Jack put the book back in his pack and took out his notebook. He read over his notes. Go slow. Stay with others. Cracks and ice. Never touch wildlife. Jack's hand was so cold, he put his glove back on. He put away his notebook, then laid his head back down and closed his eyes. He just wanted to sleep. The warmth from the small heater felt good. The sound of the snowmobiles was fading into the distance. As he started to fall asleep, the words of his notes ran through his mind. Go slow. Stay with others. Cracks and ice. Oh no, thought Jack. He sat straight up, tossed off his blanket, threw on his pack, and rushed out of the hut. The wind was blowing the snow into icy clouds. Jack pulled up his ski mask and lowered his goggles. Annie, he shouted. What? Her voice coming from a distance. Jack caught sight of her. She was aiming her camera up the slope at the smoking crater of the mountain. You have to come back now, he shouted, walking towards her. You shouldn't be walking around all by yourself. Okay. Annie put her camera in her pocket. Come on. He took Annie's hand and they held on to each other and walked through the blowing snow towards the hut. Remember Nancy's rules. There are deep cracks in the... Before Jack could finish, the ground beneath him gave way, and he and Annie crashed through a thin layer of snow, hiding a deep crack in the ice. Jack and Annie landed on an icy ledge. Clumps of snow fell on top of them. Silence filled the air. A thin shaft of light came from the opening they'd just fallen through. It was at least 10 feet above them. You okay? Jack said. I think so, said Annie. They both sat up slowly. Annie peered over the edge of the ledge. Uh-oh, she said. Look. Jack looked. He and Annie were on the edge of a ravine that plunged thousands of feet down into darkness. This must be one of those hidden places in the mountain Nancy was talking about. The ones made by the lava and hot gases. It's incredible, said Annie. She reached into her pocket for the camera. As soon as she moved, Jack heard the ice crack. Don't move, he said. Annie froze. Forget the pictures, said Jack. We're facing serious danger here. If we move, the ice might break under us and we'll fall thousands of feet. Got it, said Annie. She took a deep breath. Maybe we should use the wand. We can't, said Jack. The wand won't work. We can only use it for the good of others, not just ourselves. Darn, said Andy. They were both silent for a moment, listening to the immense silence around them. Okay, said Annie. The way I see it, if we don't use the wand, we'll be stuck here forever. Soon we'll make the wrong move and fall. Right, said Jack. So we'll never find the secret of happiness for Merlin, said Annie. Merlin will fade away completely from sorrow, and Camelot will lose his magic forever. Right, said Jack. So maybe in this case, rescuing ourselves isn't just our good. Our good is also the good of others, like Merlin. Good thinking, said Jack. Let's try it. He carefully twisted around, took off his backpack, then very slowly reached inside and pulled out the wand. Okay, 5 words, Jack whispered. I guess I'll just wish for it to save you and me and Merlin. Hey, why don't we make that wish a long time ago? We couldn't, said Annie. We hadn't tried our hardest yet. Right. Get ready, said Jack. He closed his eyes, held up the gleaming silver wand, and said, Save Annie, Merlin, and me. Jack waited a moment. Then he opened his eyes and looked around. What happened? He said. Nothing, said Annie. So I guess it didn't work. He turned to put the wand again. I guess the rules must be. Crack! The ice broke. The ledge gave way. Ah, called Annie and Jack as they fell through the twilight, down through the darkness, down, down, down into the blackness. Next time we will start with chapter 7 and find out what happens to Annie and Jack.